I held the hospital folder under my jacket like it was something dirty. The paper inside said my cancer was already in more than one place. The doctor had used words like aggressive and spread in limited time. I had nodded like I understood, then walked out into the parking lot and sat in my car until my hands stopped shaking. I did not call my wife. I did not text her. I started the engine and drove home with the heater on, even though I felt cold in my bones. In the kitchen, I washed my hands longer than I needed to. I stared at the knife block and the eggs and the bread. My body felt normal enough to move, but my head kept replaying the doctor's voice. Chemo, surgery, months of being sick on purpose, hopping for more months later. The only chance to live longer. I heard another voice too, my own, quiet and stubborn, saying no, not like that, not with her watching me disappear in pieces. I cracked eggs into a bowl and beat them until the yellow turned smooth. The pan heated. Butter hissed. The smell should have been comforting. Instead, it made my throat tighten because it felt like I was stealing something I did not deserve anymore. I toasted bread and cut fruit and poured coffee into her favorite mug. My hands worked on their own, practiced. My mind stayed on the countdown I had started without meaning to. I carried the tray down the hall, careful not to spill. The house was still. Her breathing was slow and even. For a second I stood in the doorway and watched her sleep, and it hurt in a clean, sharp way. She looked safe. She looked like she belonged to a future I had just been removed from. I sat on the edge of the bed and whispered her name. Her eyes opened, then softened when she saw the tray. She smiled, the kind of smile that came before words. She pushed herself up, hair messy, cheeks warm from sleep. "What is this?" she asked, half laughing, half confused. I told her it was breakfast. I told her I just felt like doing something nice. I watched her take the first bite. I watched her relax into the pillows like the world was simple. She thanked me and I felt something twist under my ribs, not pain yet but pressure. I leaned in and kissed her forehead and forced my voice to stay steady. I asked her how she slept. I asked her what she wanted to do later. Normal questions. Safe questions. Questions that kept me from saying the ones that would change everything. She talked about the day ahead. She told me a small story from work. She laughed at herself and I laughed too, timed right like I had practiced. I studied her face while she spoke, memorizing it like a map. The small line near her mouth. The way her eyes narrowed when she smiled for real. I was already grieving, right there on the bed, while she ate strawberries and thought the morning was just a sweet surprise. I had made a decision in the car, and I kept making it with every second I stayed quiet. No hospitals, no long fights, no watching her beg me to do things I did not want. I wanted happy memories only. I wanted to leave her with warmth, not weeks of fear and machines and hope that turned into bitterness. Remember, she had no idea why I changed. She reached for my hand, squeezed it, and said, "You have been so good to me lately." The word lately hit me like a warning, because even this, even the breakfast, was a pattern starting, a trail, proof that something had shifted. I squeezed back and smiled until my face ached, because I could not tell her the truth without losing the peace I was trying to build. And as she ate and looked at me like I was the same man as yesterday, one thought kept rising behind everything else, steady and dark. But what happened when the person I loved most found out I chose this alone? My life had been built around my workshop long before any doctor said the word cancer. I rented a narrow unit at the edge of an industrial strip, with a rolling door that never closed as smoothly as it should. The concrete floor stayed cold even in summer. The air always smelled like dust and oil and cut wood. I had liked that smell because it meant I was working, and working meant we were safe. I ran the business alone most days. I took orders, I built things, I fixed mistakes, and I delivered when I could not afford to lose a customer. My phone stayed on the bench beside the tools, face up, waiting for calls like it was another piece of equipment. I measured time in deadlines, invoices, and how long I could keep a client calm. If I stopped moving, money stopped too. That thought had kept me upright through years of long days. I paid rent for the space every month on time, even when it squeezed. I hated owing anyone anything. I liked looking my landlord in the eye and knowing I had held up my side. The rent receipt felt like proof that I still had control. My hands could make something real, and that real thing could pay for groceries, for bills, for the quiet future my wife deserved. The hours shaped everything else. I left early and came home late, not because I wanted to be away from her, but because work was how I loved her. I did not say big words. I did not make promises I could not measure. I showed up. I handled problems. I kept the lights on. That was my language. I thought it was enough because it had always worked. Most evenings I walked through the door already planning the next day. I carried the shop noise in my head like a ringing. My shoulders stayed tight even when I sat down. She asked how my day was, and I gave short answers without meaning to. Not because I did not want to share, but because my brain stayed in the workshop, checking lists, counting hours, thinking about money. I told myself I was protecting her from stress, when really I was training her to live around my silence. She never acted weak about it. She adapted. She planned dinner around my late arrivals. She kept things running at home without making me feel guilty. When she wanted something from me, she asked directly. When she was upset, she said it out loud. That strength had been one of the reasons I married her. It also meant I knew exactly what would happen if she ever believed I was in danger. She would not sit quietly. She would fight. She would demand a plan. She would not accept half-truths. On the rare nights I got home early, she looked at me like I had surprised her. We ate together. We watched something on the couch. We talked about small things we might do someday, like trips and house projects, like time was a box we could open whenever we wanted. Those evenings felt calm, but even then my mind circled back to work. I kept thinking about the next order, the next bill, the next reason I had to keep going. I had been proud of that routine. It was not exciting, but it was stable. It was a life built around work, and I believed stability was the same as safety. I did not understand how fragile it was until I looked back later and saw how everything depended on my body staying reliable. This was life before the checkup changed everything. Then a normal appointment turned into a sentence I could not ignore. My wife had never been the kind of person who froze when something went wrong. If the car made a new sound, she booked the appointment. If a bill looked off, she called and stayed on the line until someone fixed it. When a friend's marriage fell apart, she drove across town in the rain and sat on the floor with her until sunrise. She believed problems had answers, and if you loved someone, you did the work to find them. That was the part of her I admired most, and it was also what scared me. Because I knew what she would do if she heard the words I had heard. She would not let me sit with it. She would not let me choose quiet. She would open her laptop and read every study and every survival rate until her eyes went red. She would call specialists. She would push me into treatment like it was a rope she could pull hard enough to drag me back from the edge. And if I hesitated, she would take it as me giving up on her, not as me choosing dignity. We had built our marriage on small, steady habits: coffee in the same mugs, the same side of the bed, the same jokes we repeated because they belonged to us. When I came home tired, she still touched my arm like she was checking that I was real. When she fell asleep on the couch, I covered her with a blanket and turned the volume down. None of that was dramatic, but it was the life we had made together. It was the kind of life you did not notice until you imagined it ending. We did not fight often, but when we did, it was always about control. Not shouting, not insults, just two stubborn people holding on to what they thought was right. She believed honesty fixed things. I believed calm fixed things. When she wanted to talk something out right away, I wanted time to think. When she wanted plans, I wanted to handle it alone and present the results. We usually met in the middle, but I knew cancer would not have a middle. I pictured telling her, and I pictured what came next. Her crying first, then turning sharp with fear. The questions. The anger that I had not noticed sooner. The way she would watch me eat, watch me sleep, watch me breathe, like every normal moment was evidence in a case. Our home would become a waiting room. Our conversations would become schedules and side effects and probabilities. Every day would start with hope and end with disappointment. And I would be trapped inside her fight, even when my own body was already losing. I knew myself too. I knew I would shut down under that pressure. I would become cold to protect my mind. I would start lying in small ways just to get one quiet hour, and she would feel it. She would push harder. We would both become people we did not recognize, and all our remaining time would be spent trying to force the future into a shape it did not want. So when I thought about love, I did not think about grand statements. I thought about her face when she was relaxed. I thought about laughter that came without effort. I thought about evenings where fear did not sit between us like a third person at the table. I wanted closeness without panic. I wanted peace, even if it was borrowed peace, even if it came with a cost I would pay alone. His love was real, but his method was risky. Because silence was not empty. Silence was a choice that grew heavier every day it stayed unspoken. And once I held that secret inside our house, it started to shape everything, even the moments that looked normal. And the risk started the day I heard the diagnosis. The appointment had started like it always did. A regular checkup, a chair covered in thin paper, a nurse who smiled without looking up from the computer, my name printed on a sticker like I was just another file. I had sat there calm, thinking about work I needed to finish later, thinking about what we would eat for dinner. Nothing in me had expected danger. The room had smelled like alcohol wipes and hand soap. The lights had been too white. The doctor had entered with a tablet in his hand and a look that did not match the normal greeting. He did not waste time with small talk. He asked me to sit back. His voice had sounded careful, like he was trying to place each word on a table without breaking it. He told me they had found something. He said the word cancer in the same tone someone used for weather, flat, clinical, like it was already decided and the only question was what I did next. I stared at his mouth, watching the shape of the syllables because my brain had refused to accept them. I had heard the word, but it did not connect to me, not to my body, not to my life. I asked him if he was sure. He said yes. He started talking about scans and results. He pointed to information on the screen, shadows and markers that were supposed to be parts of me. I nodded at the right moments, but the sound in my ears grew louder, like blood rushing. I felt my hands go numb. I watched my fingers on my knees like they belonged to someone else. Then he said it had already spread. That sentence changed the air in the room. A diagnosis was one kind of fear. Spread was another. Spread meant time was not on my side. Spread meant there was no simple fix, no clean cut. It meant the problem was not sitting in one place waiting to be removed. It meant it had moved without asking, while I had been working late and drinking coffee and acting like the future was guaranteed. I asked him how bad it was. He did not give me comfort. He gave me numbers and odds. He told me the main chance for more time was aggressive treatment, chemo, surgery. He said those words like they were tools, like they were the only tools left in the box. He talked about side effects and schedules and how hard it would be. He said it could buy time, and then he paused, like time was a product with an unknown price. I tried to picture chemo. I tried to picture my wife sitting beside me in a clinic chair, holding my hand while poison ran into my arm on purpose. I tried to picture coming home weak, vomiting, losing weight, losing hair, losing control. I tried to picture surgery, a bed, tubes, recovery, her face when she realized she could not fix it with effort. The doctor asked if I had someone with me. He asked if I wanted to call my spouse. He said it might help to have support while we talked about next steps. My mouth had opened, but nothing came out at first. The room had narrowed. I had felt trapped inside my own body, like the walls had moved closer. I thought about my wife's strength, the way she attacked problems. I thought about her panic when something threatened our life together. I thought about arguments that would fill our home, not because we did not love each other, but because love would turn into fear and fear would turn into pressure. I said I would tell her later. The doctor looked at me for a long second. He did not argue. He just repeated the options, the timelines, the words I did not want. He printed papers. He offered referrals. He told me I needed to decide soon because waiting would not help. I took the folder with both hands. It felt heavier than paper. It felt like a stone. When I left the room, the hallway looked the same as when I had walked in. People sat in chairs scrolling on their phones. A child coughed. A TV played with the volume low. The world kept moving at normal speed, and I did not understand how that was possible. Outside, sunlight hit my face and I almost laughed because it felt wrong. I stood by my car and tried to breathe, but each breath felt like it belonged to a different life than the one I had just been given. This was the moment my future split into two paths. I got in the driver's seat and held the folder on my lap, staring at my wife's name on my phone screen, knowing I could fight or I could stop, and I had not decided who got to know. I sat in my car with the engine off and the folder open on my lap. The pages looked official and clean, but they described something messy inside me. I read the same lines again and again, like repetition could change them. Cancer. Spread. Aggressive treatment as the main chance for more time. Each word felt like a lock clicking shut. In my head, I did not picture a long future. I pictured a narrow hallway. At one end, there was treatment. At the other end, there was no treatment. Both ends led to the same place eventually. The difference was what happened in the middle and who had to watch it. I had seen what treatment did to people, not in a dramatic movie way, in a quiet, real way. Weeks and months measured by appointments and nausea and exhaustion. Days that started with hope and ended with someone staring at a ceiling, too tired to talk. I did not need exact numbers to feel the weight of that. The doctor had not promised me a cure. He had offered a chance at more time, paid for with suffering. I started doing private math with my life, even though I hated that kind of thinking. How many good mornings did I have left if I did nothing? How many of those mornings would turn into sick mornings if I did something? How many evenings would I spend on a couch with my wife's head on my shoulder? And how many evenings would I spend with her holding a bucket and trying not to cry? I knew what people expected: fight, be strong, do everything. People said those words like they were simple, like the body was a machine and courage was a switch. But I felt tired before the fight even started. Not tired in my muscles, tired in a deeper place. Tired of hospitals, tired of being turned into a project, tired of having my life measured and managed by strangers with gloves. There was also dignity, and I hated that I cared about it, but I did. I did not want my wife to remember me as a man shrinking into a bed, asking for help with basic things, apologizing for being a burden. I did not want her to start seeing me as fragile. I had spent years being the reliable one, the one who carried weight, the one who fixed problems. I could not stand the idea of my last months being a slow lesson for her in how to lose me. Control mattered to me more than I liked to admit. The workshop was control. Paying bills on time was control. Keeping panic out of our home was control. Treatment felt like handing that control away. It felt like choosing to be sick on purpose in a place where I could not even decide when the lights went off. So my decision formed in pieces, not all at once. It formed when I imagined my wife sitting alone in the waiting room. It formed when I imagined our bedroom turning into a storage space for medical supplies. It formed when I pictured her trying to be brave, then breaking in private, then blaming herself when bravery did not change anything. And then another thought came, quiet but sharp. Time was not just something I had, it was something I spent. Every hour had a cost now. If I was going to spend what I had left, I wanted to spend it with her laughing at a table, not with her whispering to nurses. I wanted to spend it in our kitchen, not under hospital lights. I wanted to spend it being her husband, not her patient. His decision was not only about dying, it was about how to live until then. But once I admitted that to myself, I felt the next wall in front of me. Because choosing comfort was the easy part compared to the other choice I had already made without saying it out loud. I had decided I would not tell her yet. I drove home rehearsing different versions of the truth, and each one ended the same way in my head. Her face changing, her voice rising, her hands shaking as she reached for her phone to fix it. and me standing there, trying to hold my ground while the person I loved most fought me like I was the enemy. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I understood something that made my stomach tighten. The hardest part was not the illness, it was telling the person beside me. I walked into the house carrying my face the way I always did, like nothing could reach me. She was in the kitchen, talking about something small, something normal, and I answered on instinct. I listened. I nodded. I smiled at the right places. The whole time, the folder in my car felt like it was burning through the seat. That night I stood in the bathroom with the door closed and stared at myself in the mirror. I looked the same. No blood, no bruises, no warning sign on my skin. That was the cruel part. I could still pretend. I could still pass as healthy, and that meant I could still keep her out of it at least for a while. I told myself I would wait for the right moment. I told myself I would tell her when I understood more. But the truth was simpler and uglier. I did not tell her because I did not want to fight her. I knew what her love looked like under threat. It looked like action. It looked like pressure. It looked like refusing to accept no. If I said I was sick, she would not ask what I wanted first. She would ask what the plan was. She would ask what the next appointment was. She would push me into chemo and surgery because she believed effort could change the ending. And if I hesitated, she would take it as me choosing to leave her. I could already hear it in my head. You cannot do this to me. You have to try. We will get through it. And then the harder words, the ones she would not mean but would still say, that I was being selfish, that I was being stubborn, that I was giving up, that I was not thinking about her. I was thinking about her. That was the problem. I imagined our last months filled with fear. I imagined her waking up and checking my breathing. I imagined her crying in the shower so I would not hear. I imagined every good day getting poisoned by the thought of the next scan. I imagined our home losing its softness. I did not want our remaining time to become a long argument with a calendar. Marriage was supposed to mean shared decisions. We had always said we were a team. We had promised that we would not face big things alone. But in my head, this was not a decision she could share without taking it over. If I told her, it would become her mission, and I would become her project. I did not want to be managed. I did not want to spend what time I had left proving I still had the right to choose how I died. The guilt came fast after that. It sat in my chest when she reached for my hand. It sat there when she laughed at something on TV and leaned her head on my shoulder. It sat there when she asked if I was okay and I said yes, because yes was easier than watching her world crack open. I started to notice how often she trusted me without thinking. She ate food I cooked without checking it. She fell asleep beside me without worrying what tomorrow would bring. She planned weeks ahead like time belonged to us. Every time I let her do that, I felt like I had stolen something. I was keeping her happy by keeping her blind, and I did not know which part was worse. He was not hiding the truth to hurt her. He was hiding it to shape the time. That was the sentence I kept repeating to myself, like it could clean what I was doing. But the cost was real. Silence changed the way I looked at her. It changed the way I touched her. It made every normal moment feel staged, like I was acting in my own life. And I knew the secret would not stay invisible forever. To keep it, I would have to adjust everything around us. My hours, my energy, my attention. The things I said no to and the things I suddenly said yes to. To keep the secret, I had to change my life in ways she would notice. I changed my hours first, because time was the one thing I could still move around without anyone asking too many questions. I started going to the workshop later. I came home earlier. I told myself it was just a better schedule, just me trying to have a life outside of work. The truth was I had started counting days without writing the number down. Each morning felt like a coin I had to spend wisely, and I did not want to spend it under fluorescent lights with sawdust in my throat. The first morning I stayed in bed after sunrise, my wife woke up and looked at me like I had done something wrong. I kissed her forehead and told her I had decided to slow down a little. She studied my face for a moment, like she was searching for the real reason. Then she smiled, but it was cautious. Her smile asked a question she did not say out loud. I started making breakfast in bed before she could ask. Not a big feast, just simple things done carefully. Toast the way she liked it, coffee with the right amount of milk. I carried the tray in like it was a gift, like it was normal for me to do that on a weekday. She laughed at first and said I was acting strange. I acted offended and told her to accept it. She sat up against the pillows and ate slowly, watching me the whole time. Every time she looked at me like that, my stomach tightened, because I wanted to tell her it was love. I wanted to tell her it was fear. I wanted to tell her both. Instead, I talked about harmless things, plans for the weekend, a show we could watch later, anything that kept her in the moment. The evenings changed next. I started asking her to go out, even on days when I usually came home too tired to speak. A walk, a small restaurant, a quiet place where we could sit close without the TV talking for us. She said yes too easily, like she had been waiting for me to remember that we were married and not just sharing a house. From the outside, it probably looked romantic. A husband suddenly paying attention. A husband suddenly choosing his wife over work. But inside my head, every date had a shadow. I watched her smile and I thought about how unfair it was that she did not know what was coming. I held her hand across a table and felt the urge to squeeze too hard, like I could press time back into place. I had to act lighter than I felt. I had to laugh faster. I had to answer questions without hesitation. I became careful with my face. When pain flickered somewhere deep in my body, I swallowed it down and kept talking. When my energy dropped for no reason, I blamed a long week. When I stared too long at her, I turned it into a compliment so she would not notice the panic behind it. That was the pressure nobody could see. Trying to make every moment count made the moments feel dangerous. Even happy things started to feel like tasks I could fail. If I looked sad, she would ask why. If I was too cheerful, she would ask why. I lived between those two questions, trying to stay in the narrow space where she stayed calm. Still, there were nights that almost broke me. She leaned into me on a bench outside a restaurant, warm and safe, and she said she liked this version of us. She said she missed me and she was happy I was home more. I told her I was happy too. My voice stayed steady, but my throat burned, because I was building something beautiful with one hand while hiding the knife behind my back with the other. From the outside, it looked romantic. Inside, it was a countdown. I tried to keep the workshop running with less time, but work did not care about my new plan. Bills did not shrink because I wanted more evenings with my wife. Orders still came. Deadlines still pressed. And every hour I took for her created another hour of stress somewhere else. Then an unexpected support arrived from the place I least expected. The landlord caught me as I locked up the workshop one afternoon. He did not do it in a friendly, casual way. He waited near the office door like he had been thinking about it all day. He was an older guy with quiet eyes, the kind that noticed everything and said almost nothing. He asked if I had a minute. I followed him inside. The air smelled like old paperwork and dust. He closed the door and leaned against a cabinet. He did not offer coffee. He did not smile. He told me he had seen me leaving earlier than usual. He said he had seen me coming in later. He said business looked fine, but I looked tired. Not tired like I had worked hard. Tired like I was carrying something heavy and pretending it was not there. My throat tightened. I tried to answer with a joke. He did not take it. He just looked at me, steady and patient, like he could wait all night for the truth. I did not give him the whole story. I could not. I said I had some health stuff going on. I kept it vague. I kept it controlled. Even then, saying those words out loud made my skin go cold. It made the situation feel more real, like my secret had started leaking through the cracks. He nodded once, like that was enough. Then he said something I did not expect. He said he wanted to let me run the workshop rent-free for 6 months. The sentence hit me wrong at first, like I had heard it in the wrong language. I stared at him, waiting for the part where he explained what I owed him or what he wanted in return. But he did not add anything. He just said it again, slower, like he was placing the offer in my hands. I felt heat in my face. Pride rose up fast, sharp and angry. I had paid my way for years. I had never missed rent. I had never asked anyone for a break. I had built my work with my own hands, and I had liked that nobody could claim they carried me. I started to refuse. The words were already on my tongue. But then the other part of me spoke, the part that had been doing private math since the diagnosis. 6 months. He did not say 3. He did not say a month to help me get back on my feet. He said 6 months, like he was counting time the way I had been counting it. The offer was kindness, but it was also a mirror. It told me what I already knew but tried not to face. People could see the change. People could sense something coming. Even if my wife did not know yet, the world was starting to treat me like a man with less time. I swallowed and asked him why. He shrugged, small. He said he had his own reasons. He said my workshop brought good work to the building. He said he liked me. He said sometimes you help someone because you could. He kept his voice flat, like he did not want thanks to turn into a performance. Relief came next, and it felt almost like shame. Relief meant I needed it. Shame meant I wanted to pretend I did not. My chest tightened with both. I thought about my wife. I thought about rent money that could become savings. I thought about the bills that would still exist after I was gone. I thought about how she would stand alone in our kitchen someday, opening mail, trying to be strong. I had pictured that moment so many times it felt like a memory. This offer gave me something I had been desperate for without admitting it, a way to keep providing even at the end, a way to protect her without her knowing she needed protection. The plan was not only romance, it was also protection for what came after. I looked at him and nodded. I told him thank you. My voice shook once, just once, and I hated that he saw it. He did not react. He just nodded back like the deal was done and dignity could stay intact if we both acted normal. I left the office with my hands unsteady. Outside, the workshop felt different. The same tools, the same smell of wood, but the time attached to it had changed. 6 months was now a number with weight. 6 months of rent-free air. 6 months to save. 6 months that sounded like a gift and also like a warning. I drove home with relief sitting beside me like a passenger, and fear sitting behind it, quiet and patient. Money could buy time. Money could buy peace. Money could buy my wife a softer landing. But money could not buy forgiveness if the truth arrived too late. At home, I lived in 2 worlds at the same time. In the world my wife saw, I was kinder. I was present. I made breakfast and brought it to her like it was a celebration instead of a normal morning. I asked about her day and listened without looking at my phone. I planned evening dates and held doors and laughed at her stories like I had all the time in the world. In the world I carried alone, every good moment had a second meaning. Every bite of toast felt like a countdown. Every quiet pause between us felt like a space where the truth tried to stand up. I started measuring my words before I said them. If she asked how work went, I gave her the simple version. If she asked why I came home early, I blamed the schedule, blamed slow business, blamed anything that sounded normal. I did not lie about facts. I hid the shape of the facts. I hid the part that changed everything. That kind of hiding did not stay in one corner of my life. It spread through everything. She noticed small things first. She noticed I watched her more, not in a romantic way, in a careful way like I was trying to memorize her face. She caught me doing it once while she stirred coffee at the counter. She turned and asked what. I said nothing, just that she looked nice. It was true, but it was not the whole reason. She smiled, but her eyes stayed on me a second longer than usual, like she did not fully believe me. There were moments where my mouth almost betrayed me. One night, we were eating out, and she started talking about a trip we could take later in the year. She talked about it like it was already ours, like it was already booked in the future. I felt my throat close. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. She asked if I was okay. Her voice was gentle, but her eyes were sharp. She watched me the way you watched a person near a ledge. I told her I was just tired. I smiled. I forced my shoulders to relax. I chewed food I could not taste. Inside, I repeated the same excuse I always used. Better tired than terrified. Better normal than broken. Sometimes I went to the bathroom and gripped the sink until my hands hurt. I stared at my own face and tried to put it back together before I walked out. I practiced breathing through panic without making noise. I practiced looking like a man with a plan, even when I felt like I was walking on thin ice. The guilt did not hit me in big dramatic waves. It hit me in quiet stabs. It hit when she thanked me for breakfast and kissed my cheek. It hit when she told a friend on the phone that I had been so sweet lately, like she had won some prize. It hit when she reached for my hand in the car and squeezed, and I realized she was squeezing a hand that held a secret big enough to crush her. I defended myself in my head to survive it. I told myself I was protecting her peace. I told myself I was giving her good memories instead of hospital ones. I told myself there would be time to explain later, when I had done enough to make up for the damage. But the gap between us kept growing, and it started to make its own sound. She began asking questions that were too close, not about cancer, about me. Why were you doing this? Why were you home so much? Why did you look sad when you thought she could not see? Why did you hold her longer at night like you were afraid to let go? One morning, she sat up in bed with the breakfast tray on her lap and did not touch the food. She watched me stand there at the edge of the mattress, waiting for her smile like I needed permission to keep pretending. She asked very quietly what had changed. The secret was now part of every breakfast and every date. I felt my chest tighten because I knew the moment was coming, not the moment I died, the moment she looked me in the eyes and demanded the truth. And I did not know what I could say when she finally asked the question I feared most. If she asked, "Why were you doing this?" what could I say? After the landlord offered 6 months rent-free, I started thinking in numbers the way some people prayed. Numbers felt clean. Numbers did not cry. Numbers did not ask me why. I went back to the workshop and sat at my desk with the door shut. I wrote down what I usually paid each month. I wrote down what I could keep if I did not pay it. I stared at the total until it stopped looking like money and started looking like time. Time for my wife to breathe after I was gone. Time for her to not panic when the next bill arrived. I had always been the provider in a quiet way, not with speeches, with paid rent, with groceries, with car repairs done before they became disasters. I did not like attention for it. I just liked knowing the lights stayed on because I made sure they did. Now that instinct became something sharper. It became urgent. I started moving money with a careful hand. I cut small things that nobody would notice. I delayed purchases I would normally make for the business. I took jobs I would have turned down before because they paid fast. I worked with a focus that felt almost desperate, like if I just organized things well enough, death would not be allowed to leave a mess behind. At home, my wife saw the nicer schedule, the dates, the breakfasts. She did not see the hours I spent in my head, picturing her alone in the house. I pictured her standing at the kitchen table with mail spread out like a crime scene. I pictured her reading something I used to handle, her face tightening because she did not know where to start. I pictured her calling someone for help and adding that she had to. I pictured her acting strong in front of people, then closing the door and finally letting the fear out. That image kept me moving more than any romantic plan ever could. I told myself that if I could leave enough behind, her grief would not be mixed with panic. I could not stop the pain of losing me, but maybe I could stop the panic of losing stability at the same time. Maybe I could make her future simpler, even if it was lonelier. The rent-free months gave me room to do that. It also made me feel exposed. I wondered what the landlord really saw in me. I wondered what I looked like from the outside now. A man making money moves. A man coming home early. A man acting tender like he was trying to fill a jar before it shattered. Sometimes I caught my wife watching me when she thought I did not notice. She did not accuse me of anything. She just watched, like she was waiting for the moment I dropped the mask. The guilt did not go away. It changed shape. At first, I felt guilty because I was hiding something huge. Later, I felt guilty because I started believing my hiding had a purpose. That belief made me feel proud for a second, and that pride made me sick. I told myself I was doing the responsible thing. I told myself I was carrying the burden so she did not have to. I told myself she would understand one day, when she saw what I left behind and realized it was built from love. Then another thought followed, quiet and cruel. What if she said responsibility included honesty? What if she said real love meant letting her stand beside me in the fear, even if it ruined the calm I was trying to protect? What if she said I stole her choice, the same way I was terrified treatment would steal mine? I started writing notes in my head that I never put on paper, little explanations, little apologies. I imagined myself telling her I did this for you. I imagined her answering, you did it without me. That was the part I could not solve with math. I was preparing for a future I would not be in, and I was doing it with the same hands that held her at night, the same hands that made her coffee, the same hands that signed paperwork and moved money around like love could be measured in neat stacks. One evening, after she fell asleep, I sat in the dark living room with my phone in my hand. I stared at the screen for a long time. I did not want to drag anyone else into it, but I also felt trapped inside my own decision, like I was the only witness to my life ending. So I opened a site where strangers talked to strangers, and I started to type. I tried to make it sound simple. I tried to make it sound reasonable. But under every sentence I wrote, one question stayed hidden, heavy and raw. Am I wrong? I posted the question after midnight with the lights off and my wife asleep down the hall. My phone screen lit my hands in a hard white glow. I kept rewriting the same details, trying to make it sound calm and reasonable. I said I had been diagnosed with aggressive cancer. I said it had spread. I said treatment might buy time but would take away the kind of days I wanted to have. I said I planned to refuse it. And I admitted the part that made my stomach twist. I had not told my wife. When I hit submit, I felt a short, dirty relief, like I had pushed a weight off my chest onto strangers. Then the fear came right behind it, because strangers did not owe me kindness. Strangers did not owe me permission. The first responses arrived fast. I refreshed so often my thumb ached. Each new comment felt like a door opening into a room where people were already talking about me like I was not there. One camp formed immediately. They told me to tell my wife now. Their stance was simple. Secrecy was unfair. They said marriage meant shared reality, not private disasters. They said she deserved a choice, even if her choice was only how to spend the time left with me. They warned that if she found out later, the shock could turn into trauma because she would replay every breakfast and every date and wonder what was real. The way they wrote it made honesty sound like respect, not cruelty, and it made my silence sound like I was treating her like a child. Another camp pushed back hard in the opposite direction. They focused on my body and my choice. Their stance was that refusing treatment was valid, and that no one, not even a spouse, could demand suffering as proof of love. They said quality of life mattered more than length. They said forced chemo and surgery could steal the little time I had with pain and hospitals. They talked about dignity like it was something personal and protected, not something you owed the people around you. Their summary point hit me in a quiet place: autonomy versus expectations. They made it sound like I was not wrong to want a clean end. But then a third camp cut between those two, and they did it with a kind of calm that felt more dangerous than anger. Their stance was that I could refuse treatment and still be honest. They told me to separate the choices. They said I could say no to chemo and surgery, and at the same time tell my wife the truth and hold that boundary. They said she could grieve with me instead of alone later. They warned that secrecy created a second wound that had nothing to do with cancer. In their view, transparency was not permission for her to control me. It was me letting her stand beside me in the reality we shared. A fourth camp did not talk about cancer first. They talked about me. Their stance was that I was avoiding conflict, not protecting her. They pointed out the motive I did not want to admit. I feared arguments. I feared her emotions. I feared losing control of the last months. They said I was trying to control the story and the atmosphere, and that this kind of control was still control, even if I called it love. They said avoiding hard talks did not remove pain, it only delayed it and shifted it onto her later. Their summary beat stayed with me. Protection could be control, and control could look gentle while it did damage. A fifth camp came in with practical voices, the kind that sounded like people who had handled death paperwork before. Their stance was that honesty enabled preparation, and preparation could not be done alone. They said financial planning should be shared, not hidden behind a smile. They pointed out that my wife might need to handle accounts, passwords, insurance, and the business if I got weak suddenly. They warned that surprises turned grief into crisis, because the surviving person had to learn everything while drowning. Their summary beat was blunt. Love included logistics, and I was keeping her out of the most important ones. A sixth camp talked about the part I had been clinging to, the dates and breakfasts and tenderness. Their stance was that the memories were beautiful, but I should not fake the reason. They said those moments were worth doing, and my wife would value them even more if she knew what they meant. They said happiness and grief could exist at the same time, and the last months could still be warm without pretending everything was normal. They warned that if she learned the truth later, the memories could feel poisoned, not because they were fake, but because the foundation was. Their host summary was the closest thing to hope I saw. Keep the love, add the truth. As I read, the comments started to blur together. Some people sounded angry on my wife's behalf. Some sounded protective of my right to choose. Some sounded like they had watched a parent die and could not bear the thought of a spouse being left unprepared. The same word kept showing up in different shapes, love, but each camp meant something different by it. Online strangers were not agreeing on the same definition of love. I set my phone down and stared into the dark living room. The house stayed quiet. My wife did not wake up. She did not know a crowd of strangers had just argued about her life while she slept. My chest felt tight, not from fear of death, but from fear of what I had created inside our marriage. Because the comments did not just judge me. They held up a future I had tried not to picture. If I stayed silent, I might keep the peace for a while, but I might also build a trap. Every sweet thing I did would become evidence in a trial I could not attend. Every plan I made would become a reminder that I chose for both of us. I picked up my phone again and scrolled, slower now. I did not look for validation anymore. I looked for the price tag on my decision. And now I had to face the one thing I avoided for months. The cost of silence. I kept reading until my eyes burned and the phone felt hot in my hand. The comments did not turn into one clear answer. They turned into a mirror that showed me different versions of myself, and I hated that all of them looked possible. When people told me to tell my wife now, shame landed first. Not loud shame, not dramatic shame. It was the quiet kind that made me remember my vows, partnership, trust, shared life. I had always believed those words mattered, but I had been acting like I could edit our marriage without her knowing. Those comments made my secret feel less like a sacrifice and more like a theft, not of time, of choice. Then the comments about my body and my right to refuse treatment hit me like a breath I did not know I needed. Relief came so fast it made me angry at myself. I had been holding my ground alone, and suddenly strangers were telling me I was allowed to want comfort, allowed to want dignity, allowed to not be turned into a project or a battlefield just because people loved me. That relief frightened me, because it did not solve anything. It only made me feel less guilty about one part of the story while the other part grew heavier. The hardest comments were the ones that separated my choices. They did not argue with my decision to refuse chemo and surgery. They argued with the way I hid it. They made it clear that honesty did not automatically mean I had to obey my wife's reaction. I could tell her and still say no. I could let her be angry and still hold my boundary. I could let her cry and still refuse treatment. It sounded simple on a screen. It sounded like something a stronger man would do. But I knew my wife. I knew her stubborn heart. If I told her, she would fight for me like her life depended on it. And if I stood firm, she would feel like I chose death over her. The comments did not remove that fear. They just named it. Then I read the ones that said I was avoiding conflict, not protecting her, and I felt my jaw tighten in the dark. Part of me wanted to argue back at a stranger who did not know my marriage, did not know how my wife worried, did not know how she would carry this like a stone in her chest. But the more I tried to defend myself, the more I felt the truth under my defense. I had wanted control, not because I was cruel, because I was scared. I wanted the last months to feel peaceful. I wanted to keep the air in the house clean. I wanted to decide when sadness entered the room, because once it entered, it would never fully leave. Those comments made me admit something I had kept hidden even from myself. I had been managing her emotions by removing her from reality. The practical comments, the ones about paperwork and passwords and financial planning, cut in a different way. They did not accuse me of being heartless. They accused me of being unrealistic. They reminded me that death did not arrive politely. It arrived in the middle of a week. It arrived between a bill and a phone call. It arrived when you thought you still had time to explain things. I imagined my wife standing in our house with no map. I imagined her finding accounts she did not know existed. I imagined her learning what the landlord did for me and asking why she never knew. In that picture, my secret did not look romantic. It looked like a locked door. And the comments about memories, about not faking the reason, made me think about all the moments I had staged as normal. Every breakfast tray, every date night, every longer hug in the hallway. I had told myself those were gifts. But what if they became evidence of deception later? What if she remembered my smile and wondered which part of me she had been smiling at? The longer I sat there, the more I understood that I had been searching for a verdict that did not exist. I wanted strangers to crown one choice as loving and the other as harmful, because if love was simple, I could be sure I was still a good husband. But love was not simple. Love was values that fought each other in the same chest. Autonomy mattered. My body was mine. My pain was mine. My death was mine. But partnership mattered too. My wife was not a stranger I had to protect from information. She was the person who had built a life with me, and I was about to tear a hole in it without warning. Peace mattered. There was real kindness in quiet dinners and warm mornings, in letting someone laugh without fear sitting beside them. But honesty mattered, not as a rule for rule's sake, as a way of treating someone like an equal adult in their own life. I saw the hidden issue clearly now, and it was the one thing I had tried not to name. If my wife stayed uninformed, she lost agency. She did not get to decide how to spend our time. She did not get to ask questions. She did not get to prepare her heart, her house, or her future. She only got the version of reality I allowed. Two truths could exist. I was trying to love her, and I might still have been harming her. I put my phone down and listened to the house again. The silence felt different after the comments. It felt less like peace and more like a debt. Somewhere down the hall, my wife breathed in her sleep, safe inside a story I had written without her consent. I lay there and realized the choice in front of me was not between love and cruelty. It was between two kinds of damage, and I could not avoid paying for one of them. If I told her, I risked the peace I wanted. If I did not, I risked the forgiveness I hoped for. I kept thinking about how small my plan looked from the outside. I came home earlier. I started work later. I made breakfast in bed. I booked dinner dates on regular nights like they mattered. I saved money quietly, cutting corners nobody could see, because I wanted the bills to be lighter for her later. I let myself accept help at the workshop because it meant I could leave more behind. Those actions felt solid in my hands. They were things I could do without asking anyone for permission. They were things I could measure: a full fridge, a paid bill, a warm plate of food placed in front of her with a smile that did not shake. But the secret lived inside every one of those moments like a second heartbeat. When I stood in the kitchen making coffee, I watched my wife move around the house, and I felt like I was watching something through glass. She laughed at a message on her phone. She talked about next month. She pointed at a movie trailer and said we should see it soon. Every time she spoke about the future, I nodded like I was still standing in it with her. I had wanted peace. That was the word I used to defend myself. I had wanted our home to stay calm and warm, without hospitals and arguments and desperate late-night searches on the internet. I had wanted to keep the air clean for as long as I could. But there was another word I did not like to say: control. I controlled what she knew. I controlled how the days felt. I controlled the story we lived in, and I told myself it was love because my intentions did not feel selfish. I told myself I was protecting her. Then I imagined how she might remember me if she learned the truth too late. I pictured her sitting alone after I was gone, replaying the last months like security footage. She would remember the breakfasts and wonder why my hands shook. She would remember the dates and wonder if every smile had been pity. She would remember the way I held her longer at night and realize I had been saying goodbye without giving her a chance to answer. That fear hit harder than my diagnosis ever did. I did not want to be remembered as a liar. Even worse, I did not want her to feel like I had turned her into a stranger in her own marriage. I did not want the love I tried to give her to become something that hurt when she touched it. And still, I understood the other fear too. If I told her the house would change in one sentence, I knew my wife. She would not sit quietly with it. She would fight. She would push for treatment. She would call doctors, ask questions, make plans. She would turn our time into a mission to save me. And if I refused, she might look at me like I had abandoned her while I was still alive. I had been trying to avoid that fight not because I did not trust her, but because I did. I knew the strength of her love, and I knew how hard it would hit the walls of my decision. So I stayed between two choices that both tasted like betrayal. If I kept the secret, I might preserve calm days, but I might steal her right to share the truth with me. If I told her, I might lose the peace I built, but I might give her something that mattered more than peace: a real chance to stand beside me with open eyes. That was the moral question I could not escape, no matter how many breakfasts I made or how much money I saved. What did love require at the end? Was love making the last months feel normal, even if normal was built on silence? Or was love telling the truth, even if the truth turned every day into something heavier, something sharper, something that hurt to hold? I had thought this story was about time, about how to stretch it, about how to spend it well. But the longer I lived with the secret, the more I understood something simpler and more painful. This story was not about winning time. It was about sharing time. And that was what I kept failing to decide. So I asked the question that I could not answer on my own. If you were the spouse, would you have wanted to know, even if it changed the last months? And if you were me, what value would have mattered most: truth, peace, autonomy, or partnership? And why? Because I still wanted to believe my choices came from love. I still wanted to believe she would see what I tried to do for her. I still wanted to believe that the quiet kindness in my hands counted for something. I hoped for forgiveness, but forgiveness usually started with the truth.